The brain works in mysterious ways. The brain works in even more mysterious ways when it is damaged. I'm Dr. Shawn Phipps, and I serve as the Chief Quality Officer and Associate Hospital Administrator at Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Center. I've also been an occupational therapist for over 21 years. I want to take you on a journey with a patient I worked with at Rancho who was featured on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. Armando Rodriguez immigrated from Mexico to the United States at 18 years of age. With a middle school education, he got his first job as a dishwasher in a kosher Jewish restaurant. He only spoke Spanish, and eventually he learned some conversational English, but to everyone's amazement, Armando had learned to speak fluent Hebrew simply from listening to his customers and his coworkers. In fact, his boss said in the LA Times article that he spoke Hebrew just like an Israeli. Soon, Armando became a chef, a lead waiter, and eventually the manager of the restaurant. I mentioned that the brain works in mysterious ways. So how exactly did Armando learn to speak fluent Hebrew without any formal education? You see, the brain has an incredible capacity for change, but it requires challenge, action, practice, and evaluation, or CAPE. Armando intentionally challenged himself by heightening his awareness of what his coworkers and customers were saying. He then took action by engaging with his customers and his close coworkers by responding in Hebrew. He made a lot of mistakes along the way. For example, the Hebrew word for salt is mela, and it's very similar to the Hebrew word for angel, which is mela. So Armando did get a few laughs from his customers when he asked them if they wanted an angel instead of salt. Nonetheless, Armando continued to practice each time he made a mistake or learned a new word, and he would try it out on his next customer. Finally, he would self-evaluate his experience using Hebrew each day and develop a plan to improve his conversational skills and command of the Hebrew language. Folks, this is what is called neuroplasticity, which it's a fancy word for the brain's extraordinary ability to change in response to challenge, action, practice, and evaluation. Armando's brain essentially found new pathways and reprogrammed itself to be able to successfully adapt to his work environment. In order for him to obtain a high level of performance, he had to continuously challenge his brain to higher and higher levels of achievement. Eventually, Armando was successful at becoming the next restaurant manager because of his commitment to learning to speak Hebrew with his boss, his coworkers, and his customers. Now remember, I mentioned that the brain works in mysterious ways, but even more mysteriously when it's damaged. So imagine that you're on a family road trip during the holidays. It is dark, cold, and rainy, and you find yourself dozing off to sleep. How many of you here in this room have caught yourself falling asleep behind the wheel simply because of fatigue? And just in time, you're able to divert your attention back to the road. Well, Armando fell asleep behind the wheel and did not wake up. He and his family were involved in a terrible car accident. His mother, the most important person in his life, did not survive the accident. And Armando was left with a severe traumatic brain injury. He was in a coma for 2 weeks, unable to open his eyes or respond to stimuli. Armando was not alone. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1.7 million people seek medical care for traumatic brain injury in the United States each year, costing $77 billion annually. Motor vehicle accidents are the number 2 cause of traumatic brain injury after falls, and 1 out of every 3 injury-related deaths are caused by traumatic brain injury. Luckily, Armando was one of the survivors. I had the fortunate opportunity to begin working with Armando at Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Center when he emerged from his comatose state. Even though he had come back to life, he was extremely confused and agitated. He did not know who he was, where he was, or why he was in the hospital. He also didn't recognize any of his family members, which included 22 brothers and sisters, and numerous extended family. But there was one person he did call out for: his mother. So how do you help somebody who doesn't know who they are, where they are, and why they are in the hospital? In Armando's case, every lobe of his brain was affected by the injury, including his frontal lobe, which is associated with reasoning, planning, speech, movement, emotions, and problem solving. His parietal lobe is associated with sensory perception and integration, such as touch, pressure, and temperature, as well as understanding spatial orientation, movement coordination, and information processing. His occipital lobe, which is responsible for visual processing. And finally, his temporal lobe, which is associated with recognition of auditory stimuli, memory, and speech. The brain controls everything from how we perform our daily activities, as well as how we move, communicate, sense, feel, think, and make decisions. When I first started working with Armando, he could not even attend to a simple task for more than a few seconds before his brain would be on sensory overload, and then he would need to blow off his brain steam by walking around the hospital unit. It was a bit like chasing after Forrest Gump, with a trail of family and staff following him to ensure he was safe at all times. I am sure he clocked more hours and more miles of walking than Forrest Gump did running from Alabama to California and back. And each day I would work with Armando on performing his morning self-care routine, and each day he got better and better at the most basic activities that we take for granted. During each session, my job was to present Armando with the just right challenge through active engagement and activities that we practiced over and over during each session. I would provide Armando with feedback on his performance, and I would also ask him to self-evaluate his performance in terms of what went well and what didn't go so well, so that he could carry out those activities with improved performance each and every time. I also interviewed his family and worked with them on establishing goals for his recovery. I also noticed that, in addition to Armando's large family, there was an entourage of staff and customers from the restaurant he worked at that circled through the hospital all day long to visit Armando. I saw the outpouring of support from his community, and I wanted to help give this man his life back and help him to get back to his role as a restaurant manager. So I thought to myself, we have a whole hospital unit full of patients, and Armando had plenty of family members, customers, and coworkers visiting him each day, and Armando was now at a point in his recovery where he was ready for that next challenge of transitioning into the community and returning to activities he needed and wanted to be able to do. My challenge to Armando was for him to prepare and serve the patients, his family, the visitors, and the staff a large meal in the dining area to simulate the busy restaurant environment he was returning to. Together, we ventured into the community to walk to a local grocery store right down the street from the hospital, where Armando needed to learn to navigate his environment and safely cross a busy street without getting run over. He actively selected and purchased all of the necessary items from the grocery store for the big meal, and the next day, Armando prepared and served that meal. And of course, his customers were very demanding, and Armando was in charge of honoring all of their demands and giving them multiple opportunities for practice and feedback. But he was so mad because he wasn't getting any tips. But we were so happy that Armando was now in charge of his own recovery and that the restaurant owner was willing to have Armando return to managing the restaurant. So, yeah, pretty amazing. So, would you all like to meet this extraordinary individual? All right. Armando, come on down. Armando Rodriguez. Welcome to the stage.
Tudara bala kabbalah, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much for being here.
That was in Hebrew, Spanish, and English.
Shabbat shalom.
He is trilingual. Armando, you will inspire millions of people from around the world with your recovery from traumatic brain injury. What is your life like today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much and Occupational Therapy for giving me my life back. I know it requires a great deal of passion and love to take care of patients like me. They have suffered a traumatic brain injury. As right now, I'm able and independent to do everything by myself as I did before, and better.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm a lead server in a very famous kosher restaurant in Beverly Hills called La Gondola. And if I can do it, you can do it.
It was a sincere honor to work with you, Armando. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
It must be.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Let's give it up for Armando.
Let's dance. Thank you very much.
So I hope everybody watching has enjoyed hearing the journey of Armando's recovery from traumatic brain injury. The brain does have the incredible capacity to change, reorganize, and develop new pathways after injury. And for all of you that have learned a new skill or changed a bad habit, neuroplasticity was at play. Whether you have a mental health condition such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, or you or a family member has had a stroke, or you were born with a condition that affected your brain like cerebral palsy, there is hope. Remember that it's challenge, action, practice, and evaluation that are the critical ingredients for success in occupational therapy and in neuroplasticity. The beauty of occupational therapy is that we have the ability to challenge the brain to bridge the gap from disability to recovery and beyond through the therapeutic use of the ordinary and extraordinary meaningful activities of daily life to help people live life to its fullest. Thank you very much.